Sure.
So we're in chapter 24. We're on page 324, the 50th of Shabbat. Right, and the thesis of this chapter, whereas in the last chapter we looked at every positive mitzvah and Torah study, gives us total union and different types of union we looked at with God, beyond even the spiritual worlds, because the spiritual worlds just get raised from that, and we get God's essence that we united with.
What did I get?
And so it gives you a great kavanah, a great way to encourage yourself to do something positive that you may not feel like doing at the moment. Right? So I get up in the morning, and I said I would go help my friend with something, but I'd rather stay in bed and chill. But I know when I'm doing a mitzvah and helping another Jew, that gives me this oneness with God. And this chapter is actually looking at the very opposite, so it's a little bit of a downer, but it's a good tool to have, and that is, anytime I do any negative commandment, and for us, let's say anything as Reformed Jews, we've decided we're not going to cross this line as Reformed Jews in our practice. Anytime I go ahead and I say, well, except the next 10 minutes, now I've separated myself from that unity, and it really doesn't matter what size it was. It doesn't matter if I said, Reformed Jews don't murder people, I'm not going to murder someone, or I, as a Reformed Jew, I'm not going to eat shellfish this year, and now I go ahead and eat shellfish. Right? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter the size of the transgression, let's call it. Now we've actually stepped away from that unity, and we're something else. We believe we exist, we believe we're in charge, and we saw, in fact, not only are we at the level of the klipa at that point, instead of where our soul should be, we're even below the level of the klipa, because the klipa does exactly what it's supposed to do, right? We saw it's getting its will not from God's, pnimius haratzon, from God's inner will, not even God's hitzonius haratzon, not God's okay, I got to make this stuff to make what I want happen, but from the acharayim haratzon, God's the klipa has to exist, but I need it, so there it is, even though I don't want to look at it or touch it. But it's still doing what God wants it to do. We are hepech haratzon, we're the opposite of God's will when we do what we want to do instead of what we should do. And therefore we're below the level of klipa. We're not even the level of acharayim haratzon. We're hepech haratzon, the opposite of God's will. So this free will we have, it's a great gift, but also it lets us become lower than the lowest point in the normal created universe. We can debase ourselves that low. So we're supposed to see how serious it is, even a small affair. And then we looked at the idea of shtus, of what we call temporary insanity, folly, nonsense. And the idea that if we really were sensitive to what was at stake, right? I mean, if I looked at a muffin and I saw someone put cyanide in the muffin, I knew it was cyanide, I'd just seen the cyanide kill a mouse in a mouse study, and I knew that muffin was now poisoned to me. There's no way in a million years I'd have to be insane to eat that muffin, right? I wouldn't say, I'll just enjoy it for 30 seconds, I'll have a few bites of the muffin, and then, I would never do it, right? You have to be insane. So the Alter Rebbe is saying the same thing applies to any avera, right? Any avera cuts us off from our source in the same way that cyanide muffin would cut myself off from my physical life. And you really have to be temporarily insane to do any avera. And that's what this ruach shtus is, ruach shtus, the spirit of folly is that we get this idea that it's not going to matter, I'll just do it a little bit, just for now, it's just a minor thing. And that affects us all the way up into our consciousness, up until this chokhmah of the divine soul, which is where this hidden love is always still there. Still, maybe not awake, but still there. And we got this example of a spouse who's cheating, right? So they say a spouse would never cheat. In this case, he said a wife would never cheat. Would have been able to control themselves if not for that spirit of folly. And it begs a question that the last Rebbe of this tradition raised, which is, this is in Numbers, right? And then from Sota, from the Gemara, this is raised as a way of showing that it's the spirit of folly that causes us to do any avera. And the Rebbe asks, if the Gemara was looking for an example to show that you wouldn't even do this little avera if not for the spirit of folly, then to make the case that even a little avera we would never transgress if not for the spirit of folly, you have to pick a minor avera to make your point, right? And if I were to say, I don't steal, I wouldn't even take a paperclip from Temple home, right? That proves my point. If I were to say, I don't steal, I wouldn't even embezzle $400,000 from Temple. Okay, less strong of an argument, right? So why here, when it says the thing that someone wouldn't even do if not for the spirit of folly, the example the Gemara picks is adultery, which is one of the biggest sins. It makes no sense, right? It makes no sense from the argument point of view, and we know that the Gemara likes to argue points. So the answer the Rebbe gives is, the example is not there for the sake of the strongest argument. The example is there because it's a parallel for what's really happening relationship-wise. Right? Relationship-wise, all of us are married to God. Right? We all have a soul. We're all connected all the time. We're all receiving this love and this life force. We all have a marriage contract that we sign, so to speak. And we're all living in that relationship. That's what we are. So this example is here to show us that when any of us does any avera, no matter what the size, it's like when you do something against your partner. Right? And when you do something against your partner, by the way, in Jewish thought, you don't just have to sleep with somebody else to be unfaithful. Right? You don't just kind of stop your marriage when you slept with someone else. Really, if you do anything, if I'm at the checkout counter and someone's making fun of how my wife is bagging things and I'm like laugh along with them and add a joke, at that moment, I'm not married to my wife. I'm not married to my wife. I've decided I'm going to leave that. I'm going to be loyal to the joke or the little camaraderie that happened here. I'm going to make some fun. Now, is it the biggest deal? I mean, if she notices, will she be able to forgive me? Probably. But at that moment, if I'm teasing, if I'm making fun, if I'm expressing anger, if I'm disregarding, if I'm controlling, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter the size, you're now not married for that moment. That's how seriously Judaism takes it. And so the same thing applies here. The reason this example was picked is not because it's the best example for the argument, it's because we need to understand, and we'll see throughout the chapter, that this idea that any avera separates us from God, it very much is the same as the way a marriage works. And if I do a little lie, not something to preserve the peace of the house, but like a lie to deceive, it really doesn't matter how big that lie is. I've stepped out of the marriage. I'm not being honest. So same thing applies for these choices. So we said even a person who cheats wouldn't do it unless they had this spirit of folly. Let's start top of 325. מכסה ומסתיר ומעלים את האהבה המסותרת שבנפשה אלוקית לדווקא באמונת השם לכבודו ואחדותו ולא להיפרד חס ושלום מאחדותו אפילו נוטלים את נפשה ממנה לעבוד עבודה זרה חס ושלום.
Which covers and conceals the hidden love within her divine soul that yearns to cleave to her faith in God and to his unity and oneness, and that resists even on pain of death any separation from his unity through idol worship. That is, even this adulteress would willingly sacrifice her life rather than submit to coercion to practice adultery.
Right,
Idolatry.
Idolatry. So this is the thesis. We know we have his hidden love. We know it's so strong we would actually sacrifice our lives to not be separated from God. So much easier to not flirt with that person, not tell that lie. Way easier to overcome that obstacle than to have to give your life up. And that's the inner dialogue we're creating here to allow us to use the high-level state of his hidden love at the checkout counter or in a conversation or wherever. ואפילו בהשתחווה לבדה, בלי שום אמונה בלב כלל.
Even if the idol worship were not consistent merely with the empty act of prostrating herself before the idolized object, without any belief in her heart.
Right, so we're reinforcing that it's not just genuine idol worship that would cause us to give up our lives, but actually even just the outward appearance of it. Even if I'm just doing it to get through the moment and then do tshuva afterwards, there's this super rational drive that even that I would give my life up to not do. וכל שכן לכבוש היצר ותאוות הניאוף, ושמהם ייסורים קלים ממיתה השם ישמרנו.
Now, if her hidden love of God has the power to enable her to face death rather than be separated from him, surely then it is within its power to overcome the temptation and lust for adultery, which is lighter suffering than death. May God protect us.
And so that's a major inner dialogue, right? I'm looking at the situation. I'm saying, you know what? I give my life up to not be separated from God. Lucky for me, all I have to do is keep my mouth closed for the next 10 minutes, or whatever it might be, right? And it can be a great motivator. Let's go to 3:26. וההפרש שעצלה בין איסור ניאוף לאיסור השתחווה, עבודה זרה הוא גם כן ראש שטוס דקליפה.
The distinction she makes between the prohibition against idolatry and that against idolatry is also but a spirit of folly stemming from the kalipa.
And so we think there's big sins and small sins, but like a marriage, although maybe, as we'll see, it's going to be harder to repair the damage I did. Once I'm out of the marriage, I'm out of the marriage. Once I'm now lying to my wife, I'm not married to my wife, right? Okay, is it going to be easier for her to forgive that act than had I, God forbid, slept with someone, clearly? But you're either married or you're not, right? It's like, another example might be treason. Right? If someone from the United States, who worked for the government in intelligence, decided they were going to now take a check from another country and start doing their bidding, right? And maybe the other country said, we want you to get the nuclear codes, and they managed it. Or maybe the country said, just sit there for a while, we'll pay you, and we'll tell you we need something, and they did nothing. Okay, maybe one is going to lead to a longer prison sentence, but are they a traitor or are they not a traitor? Right? Is one any more a traitor than the other? That was a rhetorical question, but I guess not. I work for the FBI, I work for the CIA, and I say, I'm sure you're listening at this point because we're streaming, we're just learning in class, it's all innocent, it's all Tanya, God bless Big Brother, right? So I work for the CIA, and someone from ISIS or someone from some other country, or Russia or Iran or whatever, calls me and they say, we'll pay you $200,000 a year to work for us instead. I say, okay, let's do it. Give me the first check, tell me what to do. Check arrives, I'm now in their employ. Am I now a traitor?
Yes.
Yes, clearly, yes. Does it matter what I've done?
No.
Does it matter whether they ask me to, God forbid, assassinate someone, or they ask me to just look around and give them the lay of the land, and really nothing dangerous happened. I just agreed to work for them. So once I've agreed to take a check from an enemy country, now I've become a traitor, and it doesn't matter what I've done. I'm a traitor. I'm in that category. I'm no longer a loyal CIA agent or FBI agent. I'm no longer an American patriot, whatever you want to call it. Now, okay, I get caught. What did I do? Did I give away big secrets, or did I just shuffle some pens around? That will determine my punishment. But the moment I've done it, I'm now a traitor. Doesn't matter the size. Same thing with an Avera. You're either flowing with God's oneness, and you're nullifying your own ego, and you're doing mitzvahs, which are our pathway to find this oneness, or you're saying, no, now my turn, I exist, I'm the boss. Once I've done that, I've stepped into the other category. Doesn't matter how big or small. So the separation from God's oneness that happens has nothing to do with the size of the Avera, and it's the spirit of folly is a saying that tells us, well, I'll just 10 minutes, just a nibble of this, just, a few words, and it won't be that big a deal. No difference in how big a deal. I'm now separated from God's oneness, and I would give my life up not to be separated. We said that a number of times, but so that's the theme here. המלבשת לנפש אלוקית עד בחינת חוכמה שבה, ולא עד בכלל מפני אור השם המלובש בחוכמה כנזכר לאל.
Yet the spirit of folly envelops the divine soul only up to, but not including, its faculty of chokhmah, which, as explained in chapter 18, represents the power of faith in God, this faith is unaffected by the spirit of folly because of the divine light that is clothed and the faculty of Chokhmah, as explained above.
So that faculty of Chokhmah, with that hidden love that's there, always ready to be awakened. It's not affected by the spirit of folly, but that's above understanding. That's above most of my rational thought processes. So I need to find a way to trigger it. אבל באמת, לאמיתו אפילו עבירה קלה. הרי העוברה עובר על רצון העליון ברוך הוא.
In truth, however, even he who commits a minor sin transgresses the divine will.
והוא בתכלית הפירוד מיוחדו ואחדותו יתברך.
And he is completely sundered from God, unity and oneness.
Not just as much as sort of klipa that creates idol worship, but even more. יותר מסטרא אחרא. קליפה הנקראת אלוקים אחרים ועבודה זרה ממש, ויותר מכל הדברים הנשבעים ממנה בעולם הזה, שהם בהמות, טמאות וחיות, עופות טמאים ושקצים ורמסים.
Even more than the Sitra Akra and Kalipa, which are called strange gods and idolatry, since Kalipa does not violate God's will, whereas he does, and more than all things of this world that are derived from them, namely the unclean cattle, beasts, and birds, and the vermin and reptiles, which all receive their life force from the three completely unclean Kalipot.
So in Hebrew, shehem behemot, טמאות וחיות, ועופות, טמאים ושקצים ורמסים. No offense to people that eat alligators. In their tradition, I'm sure it's tasty and healthy and wonderful. But for us, these animals we can't eat, we can think of them as the lower category in our soul system, and we become even lower than them. When I say, okay, my turn, I said I was gonna come to Kabbalat Shabbat at temple. Instead, I'm gonna stay home and watch YouTube or whatever. Now, that's my opportunity to get lower than the vermin. So show up. Dama yatush kadamach.
And our sages have said, when a man sins, he is told, the net preceded you.
Okay, so we get a little earlier era science here. So I haven't seen anybody work around this one and figure out how it is that we don't even know what a yatush is. Some say a gnat, some say a mosquito, and apparently these very little gnatty things, the scientists believed in those times because they couldn't see any excretion that they didn't have excretion. And I haven't Wikipedia'd it, but I assume a gnat does have excretion. It's just so small that you need a modern instrument to see it. But the idea, basically it's so small, it doesn't produce anything that you could take and use as manure, or it doesn't give back to society. Who knows, right? Maybe it does and some of it understand. But this concept of a little tiny creature that doesn't even visibly excrete, that is considered the lowest of the low. Let's do the Hebrew. Perush de'af yatush machnis ve'eno motzi. This means
that even the gnat, which as the Talmud states, consumes food but does not excrete, indicating a klipa, which is the height of selfishness. It does not give anything of itself.
שהיא קליפה היותר תחתונה, וכאן מבחינת הקדושה, המשפט בתכלית הריחו קודמת לאיש החוטא בהשתלשלות וירידת החיות מרצון העליון ברוך הוא.
Which is the very lowest form of kalipa and is far removed from holiness, which characteristically gives of itself even to those far from it, for holiness implies humility, which leads to kindness and to benevolence, while klipa represents egocentricity and selfishness. Now, even the very lowest klipa, symbolized by the gnat, takes precedence over the sinner in the order of descent of the divine life force from the divine will.
So it sounds like he's just describing generalities, right? That it gives of itself, even goes far from it. This is actually referring to specific distinctions between klipa and kedusha, right? Between ego and holiness. So there's two major distinctions between klipa and kedusha. Because by the way, Sitra Achra, that whole side of the universe, there is chesed of klipa, right? I mean, the animal soul has chesed too. And Yishmael, one of Abraham's sons, who represented klipa, also had chesed, but it's a different kind of chesed. So it's not that klipa doesn't give, it's that when klipa expresses chesed, it expresses it in two distinct ways. One is, Kedusha gives of itself, right, in a way that it feels. It gives personally, whereas Klipa gives just extra, right? So once someone asked the last Rebbe of this tradition, how much tzedakah should do anything given a year? He was a very wealthy person. The answer was, you need to give till it hurts. Right? So obviously not 10%, not halalic. But what is the right spiritual level for this very wealthy person? If you're just giving, whatever, $5 million that year, and it's just extra, and you don't feel it, you don't notice it, great, it's generous, but that's not your spiritual level. You need to give till you feel it, till it hurts. You know what that feels like? So for them, it might have been $20 million, and now they really notice it, right? That's how holiness gives. Holiness gives from myself, not just from the extras that I won't notice. Yeah?
Where it said in the paragraph before that the gnat preceded you. I mean, in creation, I think the idea of us having enough bittul to know that even that lowly gnat was created before us.
Yeah, that idea is there too. The idea that the gnat actually was created before us. God thought of, not to think of, but God spoke the gnat into existence before us. So the gnat's like, ha ha ha, I was here first. So that's an opportunity for bittul. But here we're talking about more precedes you spiritually, that you can lower yourself also. So both meanings are true. Good. So the first distinction is holiness gives from itself, klipa from extra. Second distinction is holiness gives to everyone equally, no matter how far. Holiness gives to everyone equally, no matter how far. The natural human tendency is to have circles, and those very close to me I'll give whatever they need. Those a little further out I'll give maybe with more restraint. Those further out maybe I'll consider giving. Those further out I'm going to ignore. Or maybe just if they really pull my heartstrings, I'll give them $1. Right? So that's the normal way that the animal soul will give, or that klipa will give. How does holiness give? Holiness gives to everyone equally, no matter how far. It makes no difference how remote you are, how disconnected you are. Holiness will give to everyone as they deserve equally. And if we take a little detour, it actually ties beautifully to our parsha this week. We're in Shemot, and we see Moshe growing up, and we see Moshe's actions, and Moshe, of course, is the epitome of Kedusha. And even though he's raised in the Egyptian court, his Jewish upbringing, his Jewish neshama demonstrated itself many times, right? When he was this prince in the court and he saw a fellow Jew being beaten, what did he do?
He
Killed the Egyptian taskmaster. Now, did he have to do that? Was that, I mean, he was royalty, this was a slave, right? Someone very far from him, and yet, even though it was going to damage him and he was going to cause trouble, he couldn't stop, he had to give, he had to save that person. The next episode we see is he sees now two Jews fighting, and one of them goes to raise his hand and strike the other, and what does he do? He scolds the person, says, why are you doing it? Why are you being a Rasha? You didn't have to do that. This is a Rasha who's so far from his stature, he's one of the biggest tzaddikim that ever lived. And here's this Rasha who's also a slave, and what does that have to do with him? And yet, even though there's not much connection, he felt he had to, even though now he's running away and he loses his whole life. And then he gets to Midian, and he sees the daughters of, help me out, the daughters of the high priest of
Yitro.
They're being hurt, they're being abused, so to speak, and he goes and he saves them, even though now he's a strange guy in a strange land with no connections, no relationship with these people, and yet he sees it happening. No matter how far it is from him, he has to step and intervene. And then finally he becomes what? A shepherd. And God looks at how he treats the sheep, and that he'll walk for days to find a lost sheep, that he'll take care of every single one of them. And these aren't even humans. These are animals. They couldn't be further from his circle. And yet he just gives. Any situation he finds himself, he just gives. That's how Kedusha gives. No matter how far, it always gives of itself, and it gives no matter how disconnected you are from it. So it's happy to give. So that's why the gnat is really the opposite. This is a creature that doesn't even give of its extra, of its waste product. It won't even give that. They seem to think scientifically, right? So that's why the Alter Rebbe picked this as the ultimate low of klipa. And guess what? We have the opportunity to go beneath that, right? So consider that the next time I'm about to let myself down because I'm tired or weak or frustrated or whatever, right? Do I really want to step below that level where now the gnat is preceding me? Cheerful stuff. Okay. Perush af yitush. Yes.
No. The
Uh,
kol shekain, sha'ar,
so we did the bottom of 327 or not there?
328.
Top 3, okay. וכל שכן שבעלי חיים הטמאים, אפילו חיות רעות שכולם אינם משנים תפקידים ופקודתו יתברך שומרה רוחם, אף על גב דאילו לה חזהו.
And surely the other unclean creatures, and even the ferocious beasts, are higher than the sinner. All of these do not deviate from their divinely intended purpose, but obey God's commandments, although they cannot perceive it, for the animal cannot perceive God's command, yet their spirit perceives it.
So everything, every animal, every hurricane, every volcano, every tidal wave, everything except humans is actually doing exactly what God has commanded. Right? Consider that. Right? It's so hard for me to keep a resolution I made a month ago, and yet every single other creature phenomenon I see is 100%. Is getting exactly what God intends for it to do. כמו שכתוב, ומוראכם והיתכם יהיה על כל חיית הארץ. וכפירוש רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, שאין חיה רעה מושלת באדם אלא אם כן נדמה לה כי בהמה.
As it is written, the fear and dread of you shall lie upon every beast of the earth. And as our sages explain, a wild beast will never defy a human being unless he appears to it like an animal.
So, in modern times we have less interaction with the dangerous animal kingdom, but in other times it was much more common, and they had more opportunity to see how animals interacted with humans. So, I mean, we look at some of these stories and we say, how could that happen? And yet, we're the worst witnesses in the world. We're not aware of how animals interact with humans. And in other times, it was a pretty, not an uncommon thing. If you're traveling or wherever, off in the woods chopping wood, you would encounter an animal and you knew what it was about. So we're told that the only reason wild animals are not afraid of humans is if this divine image that we reflect goes from our face. So if I'm in it for me, I'm doing stuff for myself, I'm now like another animal. It's my animal soul that's running it, and the animal looks at me and sees another animal, it's like, if I'm hungry, why not, right? Whereas if I have my divine soul running the show, now the animal looks at a person, sees a divine image, says, oh, that's not an animal, it's not prey, and will apparently interact very differently, as we've heard through many stories in our tradition. והצדיקים שאין צלם אלוקים מסתלק מעל פניהם כל חיות רעות התכפיין. Did I miss something?
No, I had a question. Is that why Joseph was not bitten by the scorpions?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of videos about that, but you think, yeah. I mean, more famously, he'll call Daniel the lion's den, and other stories more recently with Tzaddikim. There's all these stories about, in the Sephardic world, they often, they have these lion gardens and they just throw people lions. There's all these stories of modern Tzaddikim, relatively modern, where lions didn't eat them and they pull them back out and they're like, whoa, holy person.
That's not, if you're holy, we'll get it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it as a test. I like our test better. Remember our test of whether it's tzaddik? And remember what the test is? From Sheish Tao? Right? For 24 hours, anything that occurs to you, go ahead and do it without any thought. And if you're not in jail or in the hospital, by the end of 24 hours, you're inside. It's a good test.
In fact, when...
let me do the Hebrew. והצדיקים שאין צלם אלוקים מסתלק מעל פניהם כל חיות רעות התכפיין כמים הוא כמו שכתוב בזוהר לגבי דניאל בגוב אריות.
In fact, when confronting tzaddikim, from whose face the divine image never departs, the evil beasts are humbled before them, as stated in the Zohar concerning Daniel in the lion's den.
Right, so they humbled themselves before him. And I'll share another story. We're going to Morocco, and I'm getting really excited about all the Moroccan traditions, and they're big on graves of tzaddikim. So one of the biggest tzaddikim ever to come from Morocco, Or HaChaim, who lived around the same time as the Alter Rebbe, The fourth Rebbe told a story about him. And when a Rebbe tells a story, it's not like a Baba Maisa that he didn't, hear from a source. Like this sounds incredible, but this is a story that is believed to have happened. Or Chaim was a big tzaddik in Morocco. His grave's in Israel. And at one point he was traveling with a caravan, and he'd organized with the caravan to stop on Shabbat and pay them extra money or whatever, so that he could travel properly with them. But unfortunately they were in the desert traveling, and Shabbat came, and the caravan leader, maybe they were behind, just informed him, sorry, no deal, we're going to keep traveling. Although halakha would allow now, because now it's a threat to your life, if you're lost in the desert,
Right.
very little chance of survival, he would have been halakhically allowed to travel on Shabbat, given that. But this is the Orach Chaim, and he's a different kind of special person. He says, fine, you go ahead, I'm staying here. And he sat down and got ready to spend Shabbat, and a lion came up. Notice, we don't want to edit this out of the video. I don't know. We'll see how it comes out. The lion comes up and looks at him, and the Orach Chaim looks at the lion, and it's just him, by himself, and he picks up his whatever they wore, his garment, and he shows the lion his bris. You know what that is, right? His covenant, and that the covenant's never been broken. That it's like he's a tzaddik, and he knows what stature he's at. And the lion looks at it. The lion crouches down and sits there for all of Shabbat, just watching the Orach Chaim crouch down like that. And then when Shabbat's over, the lion comes over, the Orach Chaim hops on his back, and the lion takes the Orach Chaim back to the caravan. And this caravan sees the Orach Chaim coming, riding on a wild lion, and gets off the lion leaves, and they say, okay, next Shabbat will stop for you. And this isn't like this isn't a parable. This is like, people actually saw this. Like the caravan saw this story came down, and it's told by a serious guy who would rather cut his hand off than lie. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not a person that would tell a story. So hard for us to believe, and I see some eyeballs rolling.
With that disclaimer, don't try this.
Don't try this in your house.
But look, we don't know what it's like. We haven't seen, and apparently, in times when there's more interaction and you would come across a lion not infrequently or hear about it, apparently there were times when these animals would fear a human and even humble themselves before a human. And Sadiq in particular had something that they responded to. That was the holy image. So, believe it or don't.
I believe it.
Yeah, right, me too. V'im ken hachote. Look at us, we're trucking. V'im ken hachote ve'over ritzuno yibarech afilu ba'avera kala b'shav masehu v'chaklit harichuk mi'kedusha ha'lyona shehi yukudo v'achtuto yibarech. It's thus clear.
It is thus clear that he who sins and transgresses against God's will, even in a minor offense, is at the time he commits it, completely removed from the divine holiness, meaning God's unity and oneness.
And so please understand, whatever rationalization is going on in my mind, it's just this spirit of folly. And even though it may be a small avera, from this perspective, from the point of separating from God's unity and being like idol worship in that sense, it's no different from actual idol worship, for which I give my life up. Right? So you see there's a few steps to bridge this gap where I get the high functioning state of how I would be in a situation of mesiras nefesh, of giving up my life to not bow down to an idol, and kind of hopscotch across to say, okay, but yelling at my coworker is actually the same thing. I would give my life up to not separate myself from God by yelling at my coworker. And how much easier is it to just not say that thing or not snap than to actually give my life up? Good. Now I've got my head straight. Now I've blown out some of the spirit of folly, and I can think properly. And now my emotions, my thought, speech, and action will be like a Beinoni for this moment rather than like a Rosh Hashanah. Even more so?
Yoter mikol.
יותר מכל בעלי חיים הטמאים ושקצים ורמסים ומושפעים מסטרא אחרא וקליפת עבודה זרה.
Even more so than all the unclean creatures, the vermin and the reptiles, which derive their sustenance from the sefirot and the klipa of avodah zarah.
And I like the next paragraph, all the aforesaid.
All the aforesaid demonstrates how one's hidden love for God can enable him to overcome his desire to transgress any sin. When he considers that thereby he becomes separated from God even more than the unclean creatures, he will recoil from every sin, just as he recoils from the thought of idolatry, because of his awareness that it represents an attack on his love of God and his faith in him.
So we're taking the mode that we're in, that many Jews have been in when they've actually been able to even sacrifice their lives to separate themselves from God, and we're transferring that mode to any everyday life situation. And now we can easily just say, why would I eat food that I just saw has cyanide in it? It's easy to not eat it. I'm not tempted to eat it. I don't care how delicious it looks. It's not an enticement because I'm thinking clearly, I see what it is, and now I can just walk past it, right? So we want that high-functioning state, not just with the positive commandments that we engage in from the last chapter, where we have this beautiful image of total unity with God, but also for the negative commandments, where now we have the backside of that, which is know what's really happening from a perspective of separation from God, which is idol worship.
So this is for everyone, not just a tzaddik, even a rasha would.
Tzaddik doesn't mean this.
Right.
Why would a tzaddik even... This doesn't help a tzaddik, because this is automatic for a tzaddik. So for a tzaddik, there's no spirit of folly. That spark of chokhmah is the only consciousness that flows through their conscious thought, their emotions, and their thought, speech, and actions. And so tzaddik doesn't need this. This is a tzaddik coming down and explaining to us how we can kind of how we can get as close as we can to tzaddik-like behavior. But yeah, apply this for everybody, of course. Question was, is this for everybody or just for a tzaddik? True. Uma shepikuach nefesh doche, she'ar averot v'gam yavor ave'al yehareg.
True, we find a principle that saving a life overrides other prohibitions, though not the prohibition of idolatry. And similarly, the law sometimes calls for one to commit a transgression rather than be killed. Whereas with idolatry, incest, and murder, the law requires that he submit to death rather than commit any of the three.
Right, so we may look at this section as like a little he's giving an argument to a point that someone will obviously raise, who knows halacha. So the author was saying, every affair is the same, they all separate you from God, there's no difference in severity. And someone will say, but hold on, there's three that you have to give your life up for, and the others you don't. So obviously it's not true. Three are on a pedestal, are more severe, are more important. And you can't say that just wearing wool and linen together, shatnez, this random sort of inexplicable law, so to speak, is the same as killing someone or bowing down to an idol, right? They're a different category. And so how can you say they're the same? And it might seem like just a halachic argument, but it gives such a juicy, tasty chiddush in this section that I'd love to... I know you have as much zest as me for a nice chiddush, a nice new point that it gives. It's a remarkable point. So let's go through and discuss it. Haynu keferush chachamenu zichronam livracha amra Torah chalel alav Shabbat achat kadei shishmor Shabbatot harbeh.
This fact that saving a life overrides other prohibitions is because, as the sages explain, the Torah declares, desecrate one Shabbat for his sake so that he may live to observe other Shabbatot.
So what the Alter Rebbe is saying is, it's not the reason that we are allowed to break Shabbat to save our lives or someone else's life, is not because it's in this saving a life is in this special category, believe it or not. It's just because the mitzvah of Shabbat is itself saying it's going to help me be observed more, right? So it's not that Shabbat's less important than saving a life, and that they're on different levels. It's that Shabbat itself is saying, look, if you save the person's life, they'll be able to keep Shabbat more time, so it's better for me. You're observing the mitzvah of Shabbat more by breaking it once, so that the person or you can keep it another 20, 50, 100 times. Right? So he's saying, it really, really isn't about different levels. It's really all about each mitzvah saying, by the way, if you save a life, you'll get more mitzvahs out of it, so the math adds up, so go ahead. ולא משום קלות העבירות וחומרן.
It is not because of the relative leniency of the Shabbat or gravity of the sins such as idolatry, and one is waived while the other is not.
Right, so, and that's the actual point. Whereas idolatry, you have to give your life up, and Shabbat you don't. It's not because idolatry is more severe than Shabbat. It's because Shabbat wants you to break Shabbat to do more. And then he gives a halachic. This is the chiddush actually, or this is the back of the chiddush. Teda sheharei Shabbat chamura ushkula kavoda zara l'inyan shchita mumar ledavar echad yoreh deyasim bet.
This contention is supported by the following fact. Violation of the Shabbat is a grave offense and comparable to idolatry with regard to the law of
Shchita, slaughtering.
by anyone who habitually violates a particular precept as codified in Yoreh Death,
Death.
Section 2, Death.
Masha ein ken b'mumar legilui arayot. A habitual sexual offender, on the other hand, does not have the same law applied as a habitual idolater. Afilu hachei pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat v'lo gilui arayot.
Yet the consideration of life overrides Shabbat, but not the sexual prohibitions.
Ela digserat hakatufu.
Rather, it is the spiritual decree, scriptural decree,
So
that consideration of life overrides other sins, but not the three cardinal sins: idolatry, sexual offense, and murder.
So this is the chiddush that the Alter Rebbe is saying. It's not that these three, idolatry, sexual offenses, and murder, are on this pedestal, and that's why you have to give your life up. Actually, every sin is at the same level as them. The only reason you're required to give your life up is just a scriptural decree. It's an unexplained, the Torah says so, so you have to do it, and there's no reason behind it. But really, every avera is at the same level, because you're being separated from God the same way. And this proof he gives is brilliant. He says, look at the laws of slaughtering, look at the laws of shchita. Right? If I'm a village slaughterer, and you want a slaughterer with kind of a good head, a good heart, but there's laws, and certain things if a slaughterer does on a regular basis will disqualify for them from being a kosher shochet, and now the meat's not kosher logically, and certain other things don't. So you'd think the three biggies would disqualify obviously someone from being a shochet, right? Whereas the lower ones might or might not. But in this case, whereas you have to give your life up to not commit a sexual offense, or rape someone or do adultery, if a shoichet does that, their meat is still kosher, right? For them, that actually is not one of the ones that disqualifies them. Whereas if they regularly don't keep Shabbat, now it's not just it's not the highest, it's not the most devout shoichet, but actually their meat is now not kosher meat. It's stepped halachically out of that category. Just saying it's completely the reverse. In the laws of slaughtering, these the three biggies, sexual offenses doesn't even register. Whereas Shabbat, which you don't give life up for here now you can't eat the meat. Now it's actually not kosher meat, right? So that's his halachic proof to show that you're not going to find any sense. There's no reality that these three are in a category of their own and are much worse sins from the perspective of separating you from God. That in fact they're all on the same level, and it's just a scriptural decree, right? It's just saying these three have to give their life up for, and I'm not explaining it. The Torah says so.
It's a chok.
It's a chok, right? Not everybody agrees with his halakhic assessment here. This is a chiddush it's not universally accepted in Judaism, but it's from the perspective of understanding and raising the stakes when we're approaching something that we might think of as a small, unimportant commandment. This is really helpful to say, I can't rationalize away and say, well, only these I have to give my life up for, but not the rest. So it's it's not as important, right? Really, this helps us say it's all on the same level. We're dealing with the same betrayal of our relationship with God, of that marriage. Wasn't that one fun? Was that one just for me? Is anybody else? There's a few for me, a few just for me every now and then. אלה שלאחר מעשה החטא, אם היא מעבירות שאין בהן כרת מיתה בידי שמיים. After Where we at?
my turn.
Your turn.
After the sinful act, however, if the sin is of the type that carries neither the penalty of karet, spiritual extinction of the soul, or death at the hands of heaven.
So now we're going to not what the impact was at the moment, right? So when I lied to my wife, God forbid, I was not married to my wife. Okay, no one's going to say that you can't say that I didn't betray my wife, even though I wasn't, God forbid, sleeping with someone else. I betrayed my wife, I stepped out of the relationship, I stepped out of the marriage. Now afterwards, not during, but afterwards, what's the after effects of it? How much damage did I do? Now that's a different story, different conversation. Okay, I lied about something minor that I got embarrassed about. She'll understand I'm a human being with faults and she'll forgive me, hopefully. I lied about something major, now we may have to do more repair, or the ultimate betrayal, it may actually end the marriage, it may not be able to survive it. But all that is after the fact. That's about how much damage was done, and that's about how much repair is needed. That's not about, did I step out of the marriage in the moment? So same thing with our soul. When I do a sin, it doesn't matter the size of the sin. We've seen, they're all now like idol worship. Okay, I've done a sin now afterwards. There's certain stains on my soul, and there's certain repair that I have to do. And there's big and there's little. Right? So we can't look at a sin and say, well, this one requires this level of repentance and has this level of, there's karet, there's different types of punishments, so to speak, corrections. We can't say because it's a major sin in terms of the tshuva that's needed and the corrections that are needed, that I can say, well, it's a minor sin, I don't have to worry about it, I can do it, I'm not cut off from God. Right? The author was saying that's a different category, and there are differences in that. Some will need more or less repair, but that doesn't relate to this is avodah zarah now while I'm doing it. Do you understand?
Excuse me. Does one have someone to talk to about this, or do they clean themselves up, so to speak, in a mental
Yeah, so the question is,
testing?
do you talk to somebody about it? How does tshuva work? It'd be nice to do a few months on tshuva. And there's, in fact, one of the books in here is Igeres Tshuva, is a whole book on how tshuva works in quite big detail and giving us beautiful tools to do tshuva. But the basis of tshuva are you have to apologize to any person you hurt, genuinely, and seek their forgiveness. You have to
Admit what you did.
Well, yeah, okay. Admit what you did. That's true. You can't apologize if you don't
Publicly,
admit.
yeah.
So admit what you did and apologize. Then you have to resolve to not do it again. Then you have to apologize to God, and depending on the severity, maybe even wait till Yom Kippur and also do tshuva, apologize then. And then the final stage in tshuva is when you encounter the situations the next time, you do the opposite. You do better. And at that point, you've completed tshuva in every respect, halakhically, spiritually, emotionally. Right? Now, do some people have mentors that help them with this? Yes. In this tradition, most people would have, a mentor as a young person or a rebbe, a leader as an older person. They go to and they pour their heart out. They tell them everything. The rebbe gives them, directions on how to do tshuva. But that's a personal choice. One can do this on one's own and just rely on friends and family, if you need advice.
And if you say the 13 characteristics of God.
Yes, which correspond to the beard.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you.
How does a person know how much staining their soul has gone through?
You have to do a self-assessment. We do. We sit and we look at our at the end of every day we sit. The question was, how do you know how many sins you've done? How do you assess yourself? At the end of every day, traditionally, the bedtime shema is the time when you sit, you examine your actions for that day, and you assess, is there anything that needs repair? Is there anything where I really got it wrong? And you resolve to do better the next day, and you ask God for forgiveness for that one day.
So it's a daily activity.
Yeah, same thing. Shabbat is also another point where you do it for the week. Rosh Chodesh you do it for the month, and of course Rosh Hashanah you do it for the whole year. So it's self-accounting. You have to be like an accountant that will look through your whole ledger and check every penny that's in there and see the right amount of tax was given and the right deductions were taken and the right expenses are in the right columns. And you really want to be make an accounting of my own behavior And that's a skill in of itself, like honesty and seeing myself with clearly.
What is spiritual extinction of the soul?
Yeah, I mean, there's a long conversation about that. We can start that next week. But there's different levels of corrections that have to happen after a sin's been done. So ultimately, when I do something counterproductive, I do damage the fabric of my soul somewhat. Or, we say there's like the rope of our inheritance. Jacob is the rope of his inheritance. We say there's like a rope that connects us to our source. And when we sin, we kind of nick the rope. Right? We can take the strings out of the rope. We can fray the rope so that it's weaker. Right? And so if I fray the rope with a small action, the repair might be just repair that section of the rope. It might be a more minor thing. If I cut a whole chunk of the rope, I might really need to tie that whole piece up again, and it'll be more work. There's some things that, by the way, murder, idol worship, and adultery or incest, that actually just sever the rope. Right? So now I've got a piece of rope hanging up there. I've got a bunch of it lying down here, and I can't just go and repair it. Now I have to actually reattach it. Right? So karet is that. That's when your soul is actually now severed from its source, and the flow of divine life that's coming your way, at its source, it's now stopped. I mean, you're still going to live for who knows how much longer, because there's a system and the stuff keeps coming down. But ultimately, we believe traditionally that when karet happens, the person will eventually, God forbid, pass away from that unless they really work to reattach the rope, because they're unplugged from the wall, so the battery is going to run out at some point. We'll pick this up when we come back. I think next week we should be able to finish the chapter, and then we'll be on to 25, which wraps it up, and then we go into some beautiful, beautiful sections dealing with all kinds of psychological. We'll meditate. So we're not leaving. We'll meditate. We'll go into the next chapters, which deal with all kinds of psychological tools for overcoming things like depression, profound, beautiful meditations that can be used to inspire, and particular tools for different character types and different challenges that make up the rest of the time. So you find yourselves in a comfortable spot. That first appearance of that rope, that flow of divine life in our being is our breath. That's the first appearance of the soul in our physical reality. If the breath flows properly, the soul flows properly. Let's even out the flow of our breath as we're doing 4 counts in, 4 counts waiting there, 4 counts out, and 4 counts waiting again before the in-breath. Go together, in, 2, 3, 4, and wait there, 2, 3, 4, together, out, 2, 3, 4, holding, 1, 2, 3, together again, in, wait, out, waiting. Keep flowing at about that pace. If you haven't already, try and bring your breathing down to your big baby belly. Let the belly expand out happily on the in-breath as the air fills. And pull back up close to your spine and diaphragm as you exhale. Following the rhythm of your breath like a happy baby sitting well fed. Let's open up that wisdom gateway, or a counselor, whatever comes your way today, share a moment of this with them. Wiggle our fingers and toes. Eyes. Thank you, excellent work.
Right.